The pupil constricts, a sharp black hole against a landscape of frantic, bloodshot iris. Within the reflection, the vibrant green rows of Naboth's vineyard sway in a light breeze, distant and unattainable. Ahab's breath comes in jagged, uneven gasps, rattling against the back of his throat. The camera pulls back, fracturing the focus. He is pressed against the palace window, his knuckles white, his nails scraping deep grooves into the cold stone frame. He is not looking at the horizon. He is trying to pull the earth itself into his reach. Shadows from the heavy stone archways carve his face into jagged planes, hiding his eyes, leaving only the tension in his jaw exposed. He leans harder into the glass, his weight shifting, his fingers clawing at the mortar as if he could tear the property lines straight out of the soil. The room behind him is silent, save for the rhythmic, uneven scraping of his skin against the masonry. Outside, the vineyard remains untouched, indifferent to the man pressing his life against the pane. He shudders, his grip tightening until his hands shake, but he does not pull away. He is locked, anchored by a hunger that has no end. He retreated from the window, his movements heavy as if he were wading through water. The bedchamber air was thick, choked with the cloying scent of burning incense that clung to the back of his throat. He collapsed onto the bed, staring at the dark wall, his spine hunched, his chest rising and falling in shallow, rhythmic hitches. The silence was absolute until the door creaked. A long, sharp shadow stretched across the stone floor, cutting through the haze. It did not flicker. It moved with a steady, predatory grace, elongating until it loomed directly over him. Jezebel stood there, her silhouette a jagged blade against the dim light. She did not speak. She stepped closer, the floorboards groaning under the weight of her presence. She reached out, her fingers pressing into his shoulder with a deliberate, icy firmness that demanded his attention. The pressure was not a comfort. It was a command. Ahab stopped breathing for a heartbeat. He turned his head slowly, the movement strained, his gaze meeting the cold stillness in her posture. The paralysis of his obsession vanished, replaced by the sharp, metallic taste of a resolve he had not possessed moments before. She leaned down, the shadows swallowing his face, and the room grew colder still. The royal hall smelled of scorched tallow and ozone. Ahab stood at the heavy oak table, his knuckles pressed into the wood until the joints turned gray. Between his palms sat the scroll, its surface stark and demanding in the flickering torchlight. Beside him, 3 men stood in a tight semicircle, their movements synchronized and predatory. They watched his hands. He lifted the signet ring, the heavy metal cold against his sweat-slicked palm. He held it over the candle, the wick popping as the flame licked the gold. He pressed the ring into the pool of red wax. It bubbled, a wet, viscous sound that cut through the low murmurs of the men beside him. His thumb shook. The ring sank deep, a jagged seal forming in the cooling liquid. He pulled it away, his breathing shallow. One of the judges reached out, his fingers long and calloused, and snatched the scroll before the wax had even hardened. The paper crinkled under his grip. They whispered, their heads bowed together, their smiles tight and practiced. They passed the document back and forth like a blade. Ahab watched them, his hands still vibrating with the phantom pressure of the seal. The trap was set. The ink on the decree was barely dry, but the silence in the hall confirmed there was no turning back. Ahab stepped into the vineyard, the gate clicking shut behind him with a finality that echoed against the stone walls. The sun was a blinding, sickly gold, pressing down on the vines until the air shimmered with heat. He walked the rows, his boots kicking up fine white dust that swirled around his ankles. He paused at the heart of the plot. A heavy cluster of grapes hung within reach, their skins pulled tight and dark as dried blood. He reached out, his fingers hovering inches from the fruit, the shadows of the leaves tracing jagged lines across his palm. He closed his hand around the stem, the weight of the harvest settling into his grip. Then the light died. The sun did not set, yet the vineyard plunged into a sudden, biting chill. A shadow stretched across the ground, long and heavy, pinning him to the spot. Elijah stood at the edge of the row, a monolith of silence and judgment. The grape cluster slipped from Ahab's fingers, thudding into the dust. He recoiled, his boots skidding on the loose earth. His balance failed. He threw his arms out, fingers clawing at the air, and crashed backward into the dirt. The silence that followed was absolute, heavy with the weight of an accusation he could not answer. He scrambled to push himself upright, but his limbs refused to obey, leaving him anchored in the soil he had stolen. Ahab climbed into the war chariot, his movements stiff and mechanical. The wood groaned under his weight. He did not look back at the vineyard, nor at the ground where he had fallen. He gripped the reins, but his hands were empty of purpose. Above him, the sky bruised into a sickly, ash-colored gray. A single drop hit the dry, cracked surface of the chariot, followed by another. The rain fell with sudden, violent intensity. It turned the dust of the battlefield into a thick, clinging mud that swallowed the wheels. The water ran in dark rivulets across the wood, erasing the marks of his passage. As the deluge intensified, the horizon vanished behind a curtain of falling water. The world narrowed to the space between the chariot and the storm. The camera began to retreat, pulling away from the wreckage of the king. He grew smaller, a singular darkened shape against the vast, churning expanse of the plains. The wind rose, a low howl that drowned out the sound of the wheels. Dark, swirling clouds descended, thick and suffocating, until they met the earth. The sky and the land merged into a singular, impenetrable void. Ahab vanished into the gray, leaving nothing behind but the silence of the rain.